Your Honor, I got mixed ideas on this one. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here from Thematic doing to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Well, fun fact, here I am to give you my thoughts on the fusion, the merger, if you will. See what I did there? The merger of Tsurugi Okotsu and Rika Orimoto's will, along with the excess reserves of Yuta Okotsu's cursed energy, forming Tsurugi-moto? Rika-rugi? This one's interesting. So, let's not waste more time. Let's start this 15-minute timer right now and get into it. So, this fusion is something that's kind of been in the cards in a way all the way back since chapter 1. Ever since we established that Yuta's ring is still around and it still does something. It's a protective ward, quote unquote. Oh, wow, it's great, amazing. Yeah, it was gonna do something. I've never seen a thicker, meatier, juicier, more throbbing Chekhov's Splagooter sitting on the wall than this ring. And this series was full of those gosh darn things, but the ring was the most literal example. But with that being the case, of all the ways for the ring to manifest, I'm actually pretty darn surprised it manifested like this. Part of me initially was like just looking at this from a character perspective of like, well, okay, obviously the reason this happened is because Maru was just dog walking Tsurugi because Tsurugi's just not built like that. But like, on a level beyond that, right, where, you know, Tsurugi needed a transformation power-up, why this transformation? Why this type of power-up? Why did it manifest in this way in particular? Why is it described in the way that it is in particular? There were so many things that were kind of up in the air for your boy when I initially first saw the transformation, and still sort of linger with your boy now. But after rubbing my two little brain cells together, lighting a spark, thinking about the overall thematics of the narrative a little bit, and thinking about Rugi's role in the dynamic specifically, in how he plays in terms of multiple things, not just his nature as a character, but his nature specifically as a type of character within the universe, I think I've come to some sort of conclusion with my, I'd say big old brain, but like I said, I got two brain cells running around in this empty dome of mine. So now that they've clashed and lit a spark, let me explain to you why I think this transformation works for Tsurugi thematically, especially depending on how it works, like, mechanically, but we'll get into that in a second. So, obviously, the in-narrative reason, like I mentioned, for this transformation to occur is that Tsurugi, the second Maru decided to take him a little bit seriously, was unfortunately taking that man for a walk. The heavens themselves fell down on Tsurugi, and Tsurugi was simply not keeping up, right? You know, rough stuff. It'd be like that when it'd be like that sometimes. This is what happens when you fight a guy with the cursed technique and you're a cursed energyless or very little cursed energy having bum. You just gotta get washed, right? Doo-doo daughter, buns, over, whack, but he gets this transformation, very specifically brought on by the remnants of Rika Orimoto's will, along with the cursed energy from his grandfather. And this speaks to something interesting. Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo is a story about many things, but a very underlying and sort of like foundational aspect of it that I think I overlook because of the much more over and heavy themes of well, I said two words at once. Humanity and connections between different groups of people and the conflicts that can be born of two different groups of people when they have very different yet very interlinked belief systems. One of the most important foundations of Modulo is the story of legacy and history and how that plays into affecting the modern day. Maru naturally is a character heavily affected by his legacy, so why should Tsurugi be any different? And when I started to look at this transformation, this merger, if you will, from that lens, I think it all began to click. I think everything began to work and wind. Because Tsurugi is a child of legacy in many ways, shapes, and or forms. He is the grandchild of two of the saviors of the world, of Yuta Okotsu, of Maki Zenin, and very specifically, he is more so biologically aligned with his grandmother, in the sense of him being a heavenly restriction user, and he also did love his grandmother. He idolized her, he wanted to be her, he wanted to be her living legacy, to be strong enough to be on his own, so he could give up this stupid little keepsake of a ring to his own little sister. But what he wanted was irrelevant. What he could do was irrelevant. It didn't matter what his legacy was in biology. Ultimately, he simply wasn't as strong as a Maki Zenin. He wasn't as strong as a Yuta Okotsu. He was a boy without a cursed technique and either no or very little cursed energy to speak of. It didn't matter how physically strong he was to be the legacy of the Gojo clan. And while things had changed and things had gotten better in many ways for Jujutsu Society, Tsurugi still had a role foisted upon him by the nature of his biology, something he had no control over and simply had to work with and work around in terms of his existence. That is what defines Tsurugi. So, of course, he goes out of his way to refine his strength in the only ways that he can. Physically, getting a better cursed tool, understanding simplement, going further and further and further beyond into what he was. But ultimately, this is him still specking down the path of only one half of his legacy. Sure, he's definitely doing things that Maki never did, but he's still living in the shadow of his grandmother. And not necessarily shunting his grandfather's legacy away from him, but keeping that innate bias that sort of locked him away from Yuta in the first place. But he kept wearing the ring. It was still that connection, that link to show that his love for his grandfather and what that meant was still there, casually over his heart. So naturally, when put in a position where he is made to fight for that very same sister that he loves and cares for, that very same sister he wanted to give the ring to, when put in a position where he has to put everything on the line in order to make sure he can even make a stand against a being from the heavens, in order to make sure that he can protect those he loves and fulfill his role as a sorcerer, he is met with a sad yet unfortunate truth. That as he is now, what he wants is irrelevant. He does not have the power yet to enforce it by only embracing half of his legacy as the grandson of Maki Zenin and Yuta Okkotsu. He is not achieving the fullness of what he could be. And thusly, in a battle against Maru, someone who, at least for now, if not entirely consumed by their legacy, at least is further steeped in it, and accepts it for what it is and will use it to all that he can do, he loses. Outright. There's no real debate. Maru was defeating Tsurugi, and while Tsurugi was speaking mad bravado about, no matter what, as long as I'm still alive, I'm gonna find a way to win, it simply wasn't enough. So what comes knocking on Tsurugi's door? What comes to complete Tsurugi in a way? What comes to help him perform the task that he wishes to do? None other than the remnants of the will of that legacy. Rika Orimoto's will reaches out to Tsurugi when he's at his lowest. Rika Orimoto's will reaches out to Tsurugi when there's nothing else he can do. He mistakes it for his grandfather at first. And notably, it's clear that Rika doesn't even like him all that much. But ultimately she has a role to play, a role to fill, because Yuta, the ancestor Tsurugi, asked her to. And when presented with the opportunity to complete himself, what does Tsurugi do without hesitation? Upon finding out that he can win, he accepts. He finally breaks down the legacy that was another part of him and accepts it into himself. But notably, the most important thing about this transformation is just that it is a transformation, an infusion, a mixture, but not necessarily an absolute domination. In many ways, not just combat-wise, but also in terms of how it functions. Because this is still Tsurugi, right? Sure, he wears now seemingly the head of Rika Orimoto with her flowing hair, but notably, he still is fighting with his hands, still is fighting physically. He has now become, essentially, the true living legacy of Yuta Okkotsu and Maki Zenin, the apex of human physical prowess, alongside the overwhelming aspects and amounts of cursed energy. And with that being the case, he can fill an even more interesting role that fits into the other grander theme of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo. It is the idea of finding the balance between two separate sides and using that balance to elevate oneself ever more. Notably, Tsurugi's current state works by a dual stacked lingering effect. The lingering will of Rika Orimoto, stored within the ring, along with the excess reserves of cursed energy belonging to Okkotsu Yuta. It is the remaining power of that legacy, literally imbued into the ring, that is allowing Tsurugi to reach this point of completion. It is through that self-acceptance and that willingness to go into this that Tsurugi is able to achieve this power. And what is that power at its core? It is not absolutely being subsumed by cursed energy, and it's not completely abandoning the physicality. It is rather finding that perfect merger between the two. Ultimately, Tsurugi is wearing Rika. Sure, he's infused with her, but this chapter reveals that Tsurugi's still under there. Rika Orimoto is no more than a mask. The ring is still no more than an accessory. He has not necessarily given up who he is. Sure, he no longer wields a blade, but these hands, this body that he's forged, is still the foundation for all that he is. He is still living up to Maki Zenin's legacy. It's just that he's now taking the help of the other half of his legacy that he had long since left aside in order to make sure he can protect the other half of the I would say the living legacy. But let's just say Yuka Okotsu is on a very, very strict time limit. But essentially, through this, he is allowed to reach the same point in order to do everything in order to save Yuka. He has found the bridge, the balance between humanity and cursehood, in order to reach out, in a way, to Maru and the Sumerians, and essentially make his will known. But with all that being the case, with the idea of a living legacy being manifested in a transformation, this transformation not entirely overriding Tsurugi but working alongside him, showing his willingness to use the other half of his legacy and who he is in order to take down Maru. But with all this being the case, this sounds like this must end in a Tsurugi victory then, right? This transformation, all of his storytelling up to this point, the accepting of his legacy, the willingness to use it, all that should lead to his victory, and then he should get what he wants, right? But I think we need to remember the core part of Tsurugi's character. What he wants is irrelevant, and even if he now has the power to enforce that will that he desires, this still isn't the right path. All this is meant to do, in my opinion, on a narrative level, is to put these two on equal ground so they can properly communicate. We know within Jujutsu Kaisen that combat is the most honest expression of self, of the soul, of what one truly feels. And one way or another, while the battle was imbalanced, neither could truly reach the other. But Modulo is a story at its core about connection, and reaching across those boundaries to understand each other. So it is only when they meet each other in the fullness of each other, Maru fully embracing his legacy as a warrior to meet Tsurugi head on, and Tsurugi embracing his legacy as the grandchild of one of the strongest sorcerers, Yuta Okotsu, along with being the grandchild of Maki Zenin, that they can truly properly communicate. Sure, they're battling for a win, but I think it's very clear that this battle isn't as simple as one gets strong enough to beat the other and then the other does what the other says. What they want is irrelevant. What they need is understanding. What they need is connection. And the only way they can properly do that is to lay out everything, to give each other everything, to meet in this foundation, in this battleground, and be able to truly understand each other. And that's what Rika, or at least her remaining will, along with Yuta Okotsu, is allowing Tsurugi to do. They're allowing him, his legacy is allowing him to transcend that gap, to cross the bridge that Yuka hoped to cross, to meet Maru, to meet the Sumerians, for humanity and curses to meet those who came from the stars on a ground where they can both understand each other. And ultimately, if you're wondering how I feel about it, now that I have this interpretation of it, I really like it. Because let me be honest, when I first saw this, as hyped as I was for Riku's return, I was like, I wasn't really feeling it all too much. But especially looking at it from the idea of this being not necessarily the culmination of Tsurugi for, the nature of a big bad victory over the big evil alien guy, rather just a way to meet him and understand him on even grounds. I like it, because not only does it tackle Tsurugi's own interpersonal issues as a character who is simultaneously consumed yet avoids his own legacy, which goes against perfectly with Maru, another character who avoids yet consumes his own legacy, or is consumed by his own legacy and his own purpose. I like how Rika, especially specifically in her more childish manner, still allows Tsurugi to meet Maru where he's at, to connect to him properly. And ultimately, I think it's very important that the two don't want to destroy each other. They just want to win. But ultimately, their wants are relevant, Tsurugi's especially. and I'm very interested to see how this battle will come to a conclusion. For the longest time, I felt like maybe it did need a third party, but looking at the other battle, I think that one needs a third party even more. So I would be interested to see if these two beings, now seemingly at the apex of their abilities, are able to reach an understanding, thanks to accepting the legacies that define them and the legacies that they avoided by the nature of both of their beings, sorcerer and warrior. And ultimately, I'm all the more excited to see where the rest of this goes. From a power scaling standpoint, of course, because we all love agenda, but very specifically from a character and narrative standpoint is where I stand the most excited. But, naturally, I am out of time, so if you made it all the way to the end of this video, please leave two sides of a coin. Leave two sides of a coin in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that link to the notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, you even have a page down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month to get these exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get those same perks and more. So those perks include the live reactions, we have the series I'm to review, ad-free variations of all my videos, early ad-free access to all my videos, your name at the end of every single video. If you're a $3 member or $3 patron or higher, you get your name listed and read aloud at the end of every single video, and you get early access to all videos I produce, including the videos on the second channel of That Guy the Rack Show, which is linked in the description down below, all being linked up in the card. Which you can go check it out. We do a whole bunch of content over there. And of course, speaking of content that's extra, if you want more pencil time, there is in fact my Twitch, That Guy the Controller, link to the description down below. Roll through there if you want to have a fun little time with your boy live. I'm live at 8 p.m. EST every Friday. So hopefully at 8 p.m. EST every Friday. But now I want to thank you so much for watching. Once again, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Red Wolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, J2MA, Guillaume, Pura Ura, Enzo, Yuki Ally, Grim, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Magic, CCC, Romano Furen, Dino, Hector Gonzalez, Tim Thomas, Kaving, Julian Perez, RXN, Nevis97, Logan Guzman, Dead Meme, Karu Deer, Christian Carter, Keon Stewart, Donovan McIntosh, Sino King, Hamza Idrisi, BNA DNA, Edwin Igbinoba, Straw, Athenzi Shear, Antavius Mitchell, Azo2404, Superflame Zero, Weary Exile, Window Life, Alex Kenny, Victor Jacobs, Todd, Dre, Axis XC, The Practical One, Aswin Hedi Presetia, JMD KD, Devi Pesiet, Landon Clapwick, Heath Nelson, CAET, Funny Dude, Jagoda, Plant Crone, Striker Man, Brandon Payne, Black Sage, and Multi-Batman Superman. Then I'll leave a thank you to Artline Art Tier patrons: A+A, Kevin Encarnacion, Sean, Dread Zoen, Midnight Lord 21, CJ, and Karina Hernandez. Then I'll leave a thank you to our Ink Tier members: King RTX, Shrimpo the 4th Shrimp 06, and Zom. Then I'll give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. And I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walking Munoz and Walkie Munoz.